Nehemiah chapter 4. Nehemiah chapter 4. We're going to be reading the entire chapter of Nehemiah chapter 4. The nation of Judah is facing some obstacles while rebuilding the wall. If you would, please follow along, and we'll see how Nehemiah and the people are able to overcome. Nehemiah chapter 4, beginning in verse number 1. Now when it came about, when Sanballat heard that they were rebuilding the wall, he became furious and very angry and mocked the Jews. He spoke in the presence of his brothers and the wealthy men of Samaria and said, "What are these feeble Jews doing? Are they going to restore it for themselves? Can they offer sacrifices? Can they finish in a day? Can they revive the stones from the dusty rubble, even the burned ones?" Now Tobiah the Ammonite was near them, and he said, "Even what they are building, if a fox should jump on it, it would break their stone wall down." Nehemiah says in verse 4, "Hear, O God, how we are despised. Return their reproach on their own heads and give them up for plunder in the land of captivity. Do not forget their iniquity, and do not let their sins be blotted out before you, for they have demoralized the builders." So we built the wall, and the whole wall was joined together to half its height, for the people had a mind to work. Now when Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, the Ammonites, and the Ashdodites heard that the repair of the walls of Jerusalem went on, and that the breaches began to be closed, they were very angry. All of them conspired together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to cause a disturbance in it. But we prayed to our God. And because of this, we set up a guard against them day and night. Thus in Judah it was said, "The strength of the burden bearers is failing. Yet there is much rubbish, and we ourselves are unable to rebuild the wall." Our enemies said, "They will not know or see until we come among them, kill them, and put a stop to the work." When the Jews who lived near them came and told us 10 times, "They will come up against us from every place where you made turned," then I stationed men in the lowest parts of the space behind the wall, the exposed places, and I stationed the people and the families with their swords, spears, and bows. When I saw their fear, I arose and spoke to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, "Do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses." When our enemies heard that it was known to us that God had frustrated their plan, then all of us returned to the wall, each one to his work. From that day on, half of my servants carried the work, while half of them held spears, the shields, the bows, the breastplates. The captains were behind the whole house of Judah. Those who were rebuilding the wall and those who carried burdens took their load with one hand doing the work and the other holding a weapon. For as for the builders, each wore his sword girded at his side at his belt, while the trumpeter stood near him. I said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, "The work is great and extensive, and we are separated on the wall far from one another. At whatever place you hear the sound of the trumpet, rally to us there. Our God will fight for us." So we carried on the work, with half of them holding spears from dawn until the stars appeared. At that time I also said to the people, let each man with his servant spend the night within Jerusalem, so they may be guard for us night and labor by day. So neither I, my brothers, my servants, nor the men of the guard who followed me, none of us removed our clothes. Each took a weapon, even to the water. The nation of Judah was rebuilding the destroyed wall. Nehemiah says in chapter 2 and verse 17, "Let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, so it is no longer a reproach." So that's what the people do. They rebuild the wall. Nehemiah and the people say, "Let us arise and build." When we pick up in chapter 4, we see the nation faces opposition from without when trying to complete their goal. Other people in Judah weren't happy with the work. Sanballat and Tobiah in the first part of Nehemiah 4 are ridiculing the work and the wall. Tobiah makes the claim that even if a fox should jump on the wall, it would fall. And Sanballat says these Jews are weak. In verse 5, we see the discouragement from the outside has affected the builders. Nehemiah cries out to God that he would do something about these people. He prays because the discouragement has become successful. The outsiders go even further than just insulting. They plan to fight the workers. Verse 8 says, and they conspired together to fight and to cause a disturbance in it. They would do anything they could to stop the wall. How did Nehemiah and the people overcome these obstacles? Nehemiah was able to overcome these obstacles from without because of trust in God. In this chapter alone, Nehemiah prays twice for the people. Nehemiah trusted God would hear their prayers and he would listen. But that's not all. In verse 14, Nehemiah said, when I saw the people, I arose and spoke to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people. Do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your house. In the midst of these trials, the first thing Nehemiah tells the people is, remember the Lord. Because of their trust in God and their dedication to complete the wall, they would finish, one hand working and the other holding a sword. As God's children, in the midst of evil times, we will also face people like Sanballat and Tobiah. We will face discouragement from this world because they want to see us fail and give up in God and give up on the work he has given us to do. So to remain strong, in the midst of this outside discouragement, we must trust in God. It's easy to become discouraged when people make fun of our faith. The reason they do this is they believe in a subjective world, that everything is right and wrong, whatever you think, whatever seems right to you. But we don't see the world this way, do we? We believe in an objective world where God has all authority. He has told us how we ought to act, and these instructions are in the Bible. There are things that are absolutely wrong, and there are things that are absolutely right, because God says they are. So when we take our stand on what God says, the world will call us hateful and unloving. And when this happens, we will be discouraged. When we are the only people in a room who refuse to join in some sin, it can be discouraging and hard to remain strong. In times like these, we must put our trust back in God. We must remember him, what he has done, and what he will do. We must remember that if we are faithful to him, he will be faithful to us, no matter what trials or circumstance we go through. Our God is great. Our God is awesome. And he is able to deliver us, and he will hear our prayer.